know, many of our publishers are rapidly integrating generative AI directly into the tools and platforms we already subscribe to. And we were having issues and hearing reports of some of these tools being inaccurate. They're with issues of fabricated sources or error messages or limited scope. And in some cases, we have the option to turn the feature on. In some cases, it's turned on without us knowing. And the ability to opt in and out tends to vary, which creates new challenges with decision making. So as a result, there was a clear need to develop a way to quickly, consistently, and thoughtfully assess these tools so we can make informed choices. So I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Kim, to talk about our process for developing the rubric.
Thanks, Julie. We started out by conducting an environmental scan of models, literature, and statements that we could find at the time. More are surfacing all the time as folks are tackling this at their own institutions. And these tools varied from things like a one-page decision tree to multi-page documents with detailed criteria for evaluation and ranking to toolkits with values and scenarios. We thought we'd find something out there we could quickly adapt, and therefore this would be a relatively short project. However, as we got going, we found we needed something that considers our institutional context and compliance requirements, and thus our project has now been several months in development. We found the rubric for evaluating AI tools in academic libraries created by Aaron Montague at Murdoch University in Australia was the closest framework for us to start with in terms of its categories, criteria, and mechanisms for evaluation. It was derived from a rubric by McMaster University, and we're grateful for its Creative Commons licensing that enabled us to adapt from it. And next, I'll pass it to Rebecca.
Thanks, Kim. So what did we actually include in this rubric and why? Well, we aim to be comprehensive in the areas we identified for evaluation, while trying to keep criteria realistic to actually assess during the course of regular library operations. We ultimately landed on 5 evaluation areas organized across 2 rubric sections. The first section, UBC compliance, is intended to help us identify and manage risks related to things like privacy and data protection, copyright, and licensing. The second section, key considerations, aims to benchmark how well a tool actually aligns with local teaching, learning, and research priorities along with operational needs. Scores in that section are framed in terms of effectiveness rather than risk. Understanding the relative importance of each consideration could vary depending on the tool and its context of use. That section includes Gen AI tool functionality, including factors like accuracy and explainability, along with technical considerations for implementation and things like ethical and environmental considerations. Now I'll turn it over to Sheldon to show you what that actually looks like in practice.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, I'm just going to slide the rubric up here on the screen, so I hope everyone can see that. It really starts here with the overview and instructions tab, and really that's meant to help guide users why the tool was developed, how it should be used, how decisions should be made following these evaluations. We also state here that this is a living document. It's intended to evolve as Gen AI tools and services evolve. As well, the intention is that the rubric is a starting point and likely is going to need to be adapted or adjusted to various contexts or tools that are being evaluated. On the rubric tab, we have some metadata to capture on what is being evaluated, by whom and when, here at the top. And then we move down to the compliance section that Rebecca referred to. So the structure of the rubric is that we have evaluation areas listed, and then we're also putting in a consideration section. We're listing key points that would help guide evaluators through that evaluation process, what to be looking for, what to be aware of, sort of that sort of thing. As mentioned, the scoring metric in this section is based on risk, so we're going from low to high here. And for each of the assessment categories, we've put in some descriptions that would help assist the evaluator determine the most appropriate score based on the results of their evaluation. We're also putting in score, obviously, to record that. And then we've also added in a section here for the evaluators to record information that supports the score that has been given. Moving down here to the key consideration section, again, following the same structure as in Part A, but now we're trying to evaluate how effective the Gen AI tool is in a particular evaluation area. And here we're going from effective as best to ineffective. You can see there are quite a few evaluation areas that we've documented in this section. Many areas of concern, we've heard presented during this conference. And as we've sort of test run the rubric on some vendor tools, personally, one of the interesting areas I've found is in discussing environmental impact with our publishers. It's been a real opportunity to engage in this area of concern. Lastly, we have a matrix tab, and the idea here is that this will list the results of our scores from various products, with the idea on being able to compare and potentially look back at previous assessments as products change in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Julie. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheldon. So in this final slide, I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the key challenges we encountered while developing this rubric. One of the first was defining scope. Rebecca touched on this. We initially went back and forth between focusing only on a licensed library databases to applying this across all of the tools we used in the library. We ultimately landed on a middle ground, tools that shape how users discover, access, and use library online resources. That said, we did have a colleague already pilot the rubric with Claude Code for library IT. But for now, we are keeping the scope focused, and this allowed us to roll out the tool more quickly in a large organization like UBC Library. Another challenge was aligning with internal processes and cross-departmental decision-making. We had to work through questions across the various teams we represented, like who's going to complete the rubric? Do they have capacity? How does this fit into existing workflows? And how do we handle tools that affect multiple units? So we addressed this through the rubric guidance, which Sheldon showed that was on our cover page, and through discussions with impacted teams. We also had to consider the limits of what we can realistically evaluate, and Rebecca also touched on this. This came up especially with environmental impact. In many cases, the data just isn't available from the vendors, or it's difficult to verify. So we shifted our focus to what the vendors do share, like energy use, data center efficiency, and sustainability efforts, and made sure our criteria reflected that. Another balancing act was between being comprehensive and being practical. We wanted the rubric to be thorough, but not so detailed that it becomes burdensome. The goal was to support decision-making, but not slow it down. Finally, we had to contend with how quickly this space is evolving, and I'm sure this is very familiar to everyone in the audience. And an example we like to use was the concept of model cards. So folks probably know what model cards are. They're essentially a nutrition label for AI, and they provide a short, standardized overview of how an AI model was developed and evaluated. And model cards came up in one meeting that I was at, and it seemed quite a new concept at the time. But within about a month, they were already being treated as baseline knowledge. And I was at one of these meetings and made a comment that anyone using our rubric should know what model cards were, but it was clear, in fact, that not everyone had encountered them yet. And so we found that that was a really good example of how fast-moving and uneven the landscape is. And because of that, we fully expect this rubric will need to evolve alongside the technology, which Sheldon also addressed earlier on. So with that, we were happy to move to questions.
It looks like one of the big questions is whether your slides are going to be shared. Folks are expressing great interest in having those. The rubric link has been shared in the chat.
Darlene, model cards are essentially like a nutrition label for AI tools. And essentially, they provide a short, standardized overview of how a model was developed and evaluated. So not everybody has that, but it it would help answer a lot of the questions that our rubric is trying to explore. But yeah, more and more folks are coming out with those. Anyone else on our group want to explain that a little better than maybe I could?
I think that's a pretty good description. Yeah, very technical though. I mean, for some of these models, they can. I think Anthropics are, pages.
And Sheldon, there's a question about like where are they and who evaluates it?
The model cards.
Yeah.
I think in uh, generally ChatGPT or OpenAI and Anthropic certainly are publishing those model cards. I think you have to dig deep into their websites to locate them. Um, uh, uh, and I think a lot of it that is also included is the benchmarking as well. And I see somebody's put in the Google Gemini model card as an example.
Thanks, Erin, for putting in the Google Gemini. That's a really classic and helpful example.
Let's see, we've got a question. After you have scored a tool, what's your rubric for pass or fail? Is there a score cutoff? Do you weight the values at all?
Rebecca or Sheldon, did you want to?
I can speak to that. So we're still kind of piloting it right now. We've set sort of an arbitrary cutoff at this point where the max score is 60. And so anything below 30 would be considered a red flag, perhaps. We haven't gotten there yet. And then alongside that, like Sheldon was saying, we've identified that if anything gets a low score in our compliance section, that's something that would be escalated and looked at very carefully to consider is this still something we think is worth moving forward with, given the possible risk.
Yeah, I'll just add in that specifically for that privacy data, we do have an institutional requirement for some tool that is requiring personal information. So we've kind of set in, one of the assessment categories. If it is a high risk, put a pause on the evaluation and potentially go and look at this privacy impact assessment that might need to be performed.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all so much for that. Caitlin, if you'd like to start queuing up your slides, I will introduce our next lightning talk. Does AI work smarter, not harder, only lead to do more with less? Our speaker, Caitlin Kanamui, is Associate Head of Access Services at North Carolina State University Libraries.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'd like to start off by stating that all opinions in this presentation are my own and not representative of NC State Libraries or NC State. So my mom has been calling me a Luddite for years, and I feel like this presentation cements it. Unfortunately for her, despite her bullying, I will not be joining Facebook. But I would like to defend me and my people. The Luddites were not anti-technology. They were against how it was being used to displace their labor and minimize their wages, which is something that I think about in relation to AI and information workers. I view AI as a tool, like a hammer. It can be used to build or harm. I use AI and appreciate what it has helped me solve. I've also gotten mad at it when it's given me bad answers. A few years ago, I gave a similarly titled talk, What If I Want to Work Smarter, Not Harder, about using AI to help solve some coding problems I had. I do think it is going to have and has had an effect on labor and libraries, and I feel like we need to talk about that along with our other ethical considerations. So, is AI AI information just fast fashion? So, what is fast fashion? Fast fashion, these clothes are produced quickly to create or satisfy micro trends. They're generally made up of cheaper labor and cheaper materials. Because the trends are quick and they come and go, up to 40% of the garments may end up not being sold and sent to landfills. Fast fashion provides instant gratification for consumers while hiding production costs, labor, and environmental from the consumer. So I'm not going to lie, I know my comparison is being stretched thin, but I also think about how AI information is one-time use. It has hidden production costs and labor, and we don't understand, and we won't understand the impacts immediately. Fast fashion has had a myriad of effects on the fashion industry and how people view clothes. Change in material quality, clothes that are disposable aren't valued. There's a timeline difference. The time from design to production to sales is super compressed. And when we think about like some of those changes, how might they apply to information professionals? And surprise, you know, the reason I have this presentation is I have some thoughts on that. From the worker perspective, AI has already changed our work. I mean, there are a ton of articles, presentations on students and information literacy and the way that we need to adopt that. There are ways that it has changed our work that we're not discussing yet. I come from a public service lens, and patron interactions on the desk and chat they've changed a little. There's interesting and new different questions. And there was a session before this on AI and access services, which I highly recommend. They got into the details so much better than I ever could. Especially now with Google's AI overview, which can be read as an authoritative answer in search. I've gotten questions from patrons asking to verify if a book exists because the AI summary said it did, but they couldn't find it. And that's just one example, but it requires a patron to ask a follow-up. So we don't know what information patrons are taking as if they exist because the AI overview told them it did. Research from 2024 showed that 60% of Google AI searches now end without a click into a website. When the answers, which may be that they're providing answers without context or pulling information that is 3 or 4 years old to create bad information for people. I find that what it's helping and replacing is admin work, taking notes, applying data to criteria. When it comes to this admin work, I think the help from AI can feel like a relief because this is often work we've had to take on in response to smaller staff and budgets. Admin work that was previously done by a person doesn't always immediately show support for students and can be an easy line item to cut. And please don't get me wrong, the minute AI can take my meeting notes and then schedule the follow-up meeting with the people we just talked about without me having to do anything, I will be the biggest AI acolyte there is. But until that point, I still have some questions about it. I also find that it's helping to write emails or respond to emails. I will say I have used it to draft a response to a patron when they called me the Borg. I know that my initial draft was too emotional and it needed to be more neutral. It still required my expertise in understanding how to navigate that conversation with that patron, though. And I think that there's an entertaining flip side to all of this, which is I've also seen that patrons are assuming that the frontline staff, the responding to them digitally, are robots, when in fact we are humans, and beginning to treat us as though we are robots. All caps and yelling is incorporated a lot. As we add AI into our workday, are we really just searching for efficiency? I think that if we couched a lot of this as I'm improving my efficiency, it would be understood differently than I'm incorporating AI into my workday. And with that efficiency, are we creating time in our days to develop and avoid burnout, or are we creating time to take on more responsibilities? I think you can see that there's more and more presentations about libraries being asked to become AI experts on campus. There's a novelty in having AI do something for you or talking about how AI did a task for you. What is often missing from that is the labor it took to set up that process. If the example I used about having AI help me write code, it was to pull data from Google Calendars. Yes, it helped me write that code, but I had to test answers, revise the prompt, and get it to the point that the code worked, which prompt revision isn't nothing. It does take time and energy to do. On the flip side, AI did not decide to write this code on its own. It did not sit through a meeting and know that this was the next step to move the conversation forward. It did not think about how that data would need to be presented to colleagues to understand. It did help me figure out that it was possible and how to put it into sheets and how to clean the data. But it cannot sit and make recommendations on what the baseline expectation should be, how to talk to employees if a baseline is not being met. But I could ask it technically to do this, but in the end, I'm still the one that has to present the data and get feedback from colleagues. As we advise all patrons not to take the first thing AI writes for you or provides you as an answer, I hope we are also not doing the same thing when it comes to incorporating AI into our work outputs. Asking AI to help write or develop things requires time and edit to critique, not to mention the expertise to fine-tune or adjust to fit our institutions and patrons. And that is an expertise that I highly value. By presenting it as AI did it, this minimizes the work that we put in and makes it easy to assume that our work is not needed. I'm also a manager of staff, and so I think about this not just from the worker perspective, but from a manager perspective too. As with students, all of us using AI can lead to deficits in learning and creativity. Personally, these are two traits that I prize in my colleagues and myself. It's what helps us to develop better services for our patrons. It also takes time to train up staff to use AI. Training takes time and energy and an understanding on many levels. As a manager, I want this for my staff, but it can be hard to implement, especially at this scale when it's not simply one group of people that needs to be trained, but all levels, including managers. If we're ultimately seeking efficiencies, isn't that workflow design? And if we're thinking about that as workflow design, how much time do people have for workflow redesign before upskilling with AI? Long-term, I wonder about morale. Does when the job seems to be editing and maintaining a robot more than creating and maintaining services or adapting services. Hiring AI experts as AI develops and we want to incorporate more into our workflows. This will require staff that are experts in setting up and managing AI, which will probably require bigger budgets for staff. Not always something we all have. If we're automating some of the basic tasks, how do we train new staff to catch up in errors in the basic information that they have not had if they've not had the training on that topic? How can you catch a cataloging error if you do not understand cataloging? And there are places that we are not adopting it, but is already making our lives more complicated. One of the easiest examples I see this in is hiring. At my library, we do not use AI to help read resumes, and I'm glad about that. But we are seeing an increase in cover letters and resumes that are written using AI, which takes additional effort, levels of readings to parse through. Do they have the skills or did AI manage to put all the keywords into the cover letter? And if we're even there to use the AI, and if we even were to use the AI to help read these resumes, it's been shown that AI services have biases towards their own writing, somehow making this process even more complicated. There are long-term issues with labor and AI. My first question is, what is the effect of the larger profession if I can solve a problem for myself using AI rather than advocate for change, especially in regards to software and platform from vendors? Will it be easier for them to push the work down to us rather than improve their program? Or if I'm not raising a problem or paying attention to the problems that my colleagues are raising and advocating for solutions, how will vendors know what to solve? In all environments, I see a lot of companies pushing problem solving or mental load down to individuals. The bigger question I have is about AI and budgets. Right now, AI is based on token use. Tokens are not cheap. AI companies are not making money. In fact, they are burning through it very quickly. And as our vendors start to adapt it, how is that going? How and when are we going to see that cost reflected in our invoices? We've seen examples in other areas with free services like storage. I work at a Google campus and we had unlimited storage for a long time, but we no longer do. And in our personal lives, many of us now pay for cloud storage. So what might be free now may not be free forever. And one thing to note is some companies, that's not libraries, have found that they've gone through their yearly token budget in 3 months, and others have found that tokens cost as much as hiring a person. So when we talk about the cost savings when it comes to labor, especially, these may not be cost savings realistically in the long term. So please remember your labor went into making AI work. When you adopt AI, please talk about how long it took you to make and how the work you went through on creating it. Always important to ask, is AI the right solution for your task? Am I trying to increase efficiency, or is it better to advocate for change? And ultimately, AI is not free in cost or consequences, time or budgets. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. That was so interesting. Do we have any questions? We've got a couple of moments for questions. I'm not seeing any come in yet, but that was great. Very thought-provoking. Getting some good comments in the chat. All right. I guess, Mandy, if you would like to go ahead and queue up your slides. Oh, we've got one quick question before we move on. We've got just a couple minutes here. Do you find that your library disagrees with your assertion that AI is like fast fashion?
I would say it depends on who I talk to. Um, one of my colleagues is in this talk, and I haven't asked him, so I don't want to speak for everyone in my library. And it is something I think that I have probably talked more about with people that are uh, like wrestling with a little bit of some of these concepts. Where I'm like, oh, like let's wrestle with this concept together. So right now they're all appreciating my metaphor. I don't know if if they'll appreciate it in 6 months, but for the moment they are appreciating it.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to introduce our final lightning talk, When Skills Are Not Enough, Exploring AI Ethics Through Scenarios. Speaker Mandy Goodset is the Performing Arts and Humanities Librarian and the OER and Copyright Advisor at Cleveland State University.
All right, thank you, Erin, and thanks everyone for the great lightning talk so far. So again, my name is Mandy Goodset, and I'm a librarian at Cleveland State University, and I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to do a lot of teaching in first-year writing classes, as well as some upper-level classes in the arts and humanities. And then I've also presented some standalone workshops about generative AI for my campus. So a lot of what I'm about to share comes from those instruction experiences. At the end of the presentation, I will be sharing a link to a handout with a whole bunch of scenarios for you all to use and modify and share for yourselves. So in this short talk, I'm going to advocate for the use of scenarios and case studies as a pedagogical tool when teaching about generative AI. I'm hoping what I share can be useful whether you're a librarian, a faculty member, or anybody teaching about this new technology. So why are scenarios an effective pedagogical tool? There's a lot of evidence that scenarios and case studies are beneficial for teaching. First, scenarios help students explore complex problems and discuss politically or ethically charged issues that might otherwise be difficult to manage in the classroom. The distance that's created by a fictional scenario can allow for a deeper, more candid classroom conversation as opposed to directly asking students what they are doing with generative AI. Hopefully, scenarios also can help students contextualize their learning and apply underlying concepts explored in this fictional scenario to other real-world relevant contexts where the stakes are higher. Scenarios that model the real world can also support experiential learning, which is becoming increasingly important in higher education. I know my campus is really all in on experiential learning. And finally, scenarios can increase student confidence in their ability to manage future tricky situations. It can also get them excited about learning. It's kind of more interesting than like a dry lecture. And it encourages teamwork with other students because it's really easy to do this sort of thing in groups or teams. While discussing a scenario in the classroom might seem like a pretty simple, straightforward activity, students actually really do need guidance in how to get the most out of this exercise. So as the instructor, make sure to present case studies that specifically target the concepts that you want students to learn and offer them practical applications of that content in realistic real-world scenarios. And kind of reading about this in the research, that article that's on the screen there by McFarlane laid out some characteristics of a good case study. So it should be relevant, so related to class concepts, practical, realistic to how things actually happen, dialogical, so it shouldn't be so obvious that the student doesn't learn anything. It should be interesting, and then it should be appropriate. So it shouldn't be super easy, but it also shouldn't be really complex and difficult. It can help to provide students with guiding questions that will help them analyze the case study, and it's essential that the students guide the discussion, not the teacher. If we jump in with our own opinions and judgment, that can really quickly shut down free-flowing dialogue and deliberation among the students. Make sure to conclude the exercise with a summary, discussion of why the activity is relevant, and some time for students to reflect on what they learned. So using scenarios pedagogically can be especially valuable, I think, for teaching about generative AI. So for one thing, although students definitely do need to improve their generative AI skills, they're often using AI fairly frequently and possibly more than we are. And at the same time, they may not have taken time to actually intentionally consider the values and ethical guidelines that should direct their use of AI. So when we set aside time for that important consideration, it can help them make better choices about when and how to use AI in the first place. I have also noticed, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that many more students are feeling negative about AI than even just a couple of years ago. Some of them really do not want to be forced to use AI, and I think it's important to respect that. So going through scenarios in a generative AI training does not require any AI use, and it still brings up really important AI-related issues that all students should be considering. And then finally, I've been visiting classes to talk about generative AI for a few years now, and I often ask students some variation of like, what are some okay uses of generative AI for research? And I get a huge range of responses, with some students describing like how they're using AI in ways that I wish they wouldn't talk about in front of their teacher. But it's pretty clear the students don't think they're doing anything wrong. And that's in classes that the professor already has an AI policy. So there's a policy and it's still very unclear what is okay to do. So I think scenarios can sometimes surface widely varying interpretations of AI policies, different viewpoints and expectations, and concerns about AI that might be lingering under the surface. There's some practical reasons as well to integrate AI scenarios into teaching. For one thing, it sidesteps tool mechanics like how are we going to log in? Do you need to have a subscription for a particular tool? That sort of thing, and focuses our limited time on thinking about AI. It also eliminates the possibility of inappropriate outputs because, as you all know, you can use a Gen AI tool and ask the same question and get two different answers. So this makes the whole process more predictable and reliable. And they also provide the chance to design learning moments intentionally because you have a general sense of what's going to happen. Scenarios also minimize judgment because they're not about any particular student's actions, which allows for more candid discussion. And it can allow for the class to not just be about cheating, but to really look more holistically at the ethical ramifications of generative AI. Okay, so here is an example scenario that I've used in the classroom before, and I feel like it's pretty quintessential to student experience. So I'm going to quickly read it now, and I would love, as I'm reading, for you to be thinking about your own response. John is using a generative AI tool to help him brainstorm ideas for his essay on the French Revolution. He first asks the AI tool to write an outline for the paper. He likes the outline a lot, and he uses it to structure his paper. When he's finished writing the paper, John then submits it to the same AI tool and asks it to, quote, increase how long this paper is, unquote. The tool adds a paragraph, which John then uses for the final paper he turns in. And so then the question that I ask students is this okay? And if not, what might you change? And then I also ask them to consider, like, what are the ethical issues that this is raising that are kind of the issues that we hope that they can then transfer to other contexts. So I think I have like a minute if anybody would like to share in the chat your response or your thoughts about this scenario. I think I'm sharing the slides. Can you all see the slides? Yes, okay. All right. Someone asked if he read the paragraph or not before just adding it. Asking to elongate the paper, not expand on something specific. So maybe there's not a lot of, John is not contributing a lot of creative thought to this. The outline might be okay to structure his own writing, then turning in the paragraph. Oops. Fully written by AI is not appropriate. Okay, and people are agreeing with that. Someone is asking, did he submit how he used AI in his paper? So was he transparent? Did he acknowledge his use? I think so. When I've done this scenario with students and with faculty, and I think also like both undergraduate and graduate students, and almost everybody does kind of generally agree with Erin's take that using it to write the outline is probably okay, but actually having it write some content is maybe not. But it's interesting to dig into it more to ask, is there something lost if he doesn't write that outline for his paper? Is that like a skill that he needs to develop that now he is not developing because he's using AI? And then I also ask sometimes like the outline might even be more content or more words than the paragraph. So what is it about the paragraph that's different that makes us feel uncomfortable with him using that additional paragraph? So it certainly brings up a lot of questions. And there's no right answer. It's the idea is that we're just bringing up some additional things to think about and surfacing important things like what does it mean to have AI write an outline for you? Is that brainstorming? What is brainstorming? Because I think students have often very different ideas about that. How does having the AI do the brainstorming impact his learning? Yeah, so that's really ultimately the question, I think. And where did he get the content to fill in the outline? Yeah, was that him or was that also AI? Okay. Finally, here are some takeaways from my experience using scenarios. First, ethical ambiguity when it comes to emerging technology, especially generative AI, is common and normal. Scenarios help us normalize that uncertainty that a lot of us are feeling. It's also a chance to highlight how context shapes decisions and to encourage students to go beyond just learning what to do to reflecting metacognitively on how they make choices around AI. And then finally, AI policies are necessary, but they're really not sufficient. There's still a lot of confusion that needs to be unpacked in the classroom. And if we're librarians, we can help faculty with that process. And I'd love to hear what your takeaways are. This QR code, hopefully it will work, goes to a collection of scenarios I have used. Please feel free to adapt them for yourselves. And I will also put a link in the chat. And then my contact information is here as well if you have questions. I also wanted to convey a quick note of thanks to my colleagues, Kathy Fisher and Teresa Nawalnik, for helping to develop some of the content from this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. We do have one question. Vanessa's curious, when you do these activities with students, do the students typically jump right in with responses?
Good question. Usually I have them work either in pairs or in groups, and then we'll take a moment to like regroup as a big group, and then people can share out what their thoughts were. So generally it's the folks who would like to share are welcome to, but nobody is forced to share. But I do find that often, sorry, y'all, I'm going to try to get these links to you. I often do find that when given the chance to talk about this stuff, people really want to talk about it, and the conversation really ramps up quite a bit. So. Please let me know if these links don't work, but I'm putting these in the chat. Oh, Erin, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, so we've still got about 4 minutes if anyone's got a question for Mandy or a question for one of our earlier presenters. We've got a few minutes, we can squeeze those in. Thank you all so much. This was a great series of lightning talks. All right, Megan, yes, the link to the scenarios looks like it is the second link that Mandy shared in the chat. The first link is the slides, second link is the scenarios. Let's see, we've got a question here. Mandy, do you notice different answers from undergrads versus graduates if you teach graduate students?
Yes, graduate students tend to be even more negative about AI. I also have some questions that are, or some scenarios that are more related to like doing primary research. And I've done this in a classroom with graduate students with faculty there, and I even had like the faculty and the graduate students were like arguing with each other. So I don't think anybody totally knows what the right answers are, but they I think for graduate students they have even more things to consider because they're, maybe they're doing qualitative research and they're trying to analyze transcripts and things like that, and when can AI play a role or not. So yeah.
Links for the scenarios just got shared to the hosted panelist, not to everyone.
Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Sorry about that.
I didn't
Hopefully you
realize
all
that
can
either.
see it now.
Thank you for catching that, Caitlin. All right, we are repasting the links now to everyone. We didn't realize they got chatted just to the panelists. All right, well, I am not seeing any more questions coming in right now, so I will go ahead and wrap up the session. Everyone, please help me give a warm round of applause here to our wonderful panelists, or not panelists, but lightning speakers. Thank you all very much. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.